Sometimes it's a lot of just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. It takes that getting it wrong to like then set me on the path to being right.
I mean, listen to the story of working on this one independent film for 4 to 5 years in grandma's basement. I think people need to understand to have some patience, but along the way to continue to grind.
There's a limit to what you can do yourself. There's a point at which you need somebody else's help. For one thing, it may be a degree, but at some point, somebody else is going to be able to really smooth you out and take you to the next level.
It's actually really helpful when someone says, like, look, I suck at what you want me to do, so don't ask me to do that.
The imposter syndrome is real, just dealing with being involved in the first season. I feel like Ringo Starr. I'm just happy to be working, happy to be on the show.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber. It is TCU's Day. That is Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. We are live on Discord with our patrons, our lurkers. We have a full house tonight because we are kicking off 2 straight weeks of Smiling Friends interviews. This is something that we had planned for a long time now. And as soon as Smiling Friends dropped, which it just did, we're here. We're here for the Smiling Friends. And with me here, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and we do want to talk about upcoming guests and just say who they are, because we want to let people know about the next month, don't we? We've got, let's see, 3 coming up after Psychic Pebbles and Michael Cusack, who are next week.
Yeah, so we have...
and who's after that, Kevin?
We have Michael Cusack and Zach next week to round off our 2 weeks extravaganza of Smiling Friends. After that, we have Gabriel Brown. After him, we have I Did a Thing. And after that, we have Alternate History Hub returning. We'll get it right this time. And have
our Valentine's Day date.
Yes, our Valentine's Day date with history. And many more guests on the bubble after that. But that should hold you over for a little bit. But we are here to talk Smiling Friends.
That's right. And in the 1970s, George Lucas wrote a really obscure space opera. But the music accompanying it, and especially its leitmotifs, added up to what the American Film Institute considers to be the greatest score of all time. There's a reason why nearly every human alive can hum the Imperial March, despite only a tiny portion of them caring whether Han shot first. John Williams took George Lucas's creative vision and set it to sounds that elevated the dialogue and the visuals. He did the same thing with Superman, Jaws, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List. That's just a portion. And he defined musically a tradition that goes back to 776 BC with the theme for the Olympic Games. There's a trick to this thing. That's the point of John Williams, understanding both somebody else's visual art and humanity as a whole to such a degree that we actually hear the combination of the two things accurately. And our guest today is on his way to becoming the John Williams of irreverent adult surrealism. Brendan Caulfield has collaborated with Michael Cusack on deranged animations and shows like Koala Man, YOLO Crystal Fantasy, Bushworld Adventures, and the brand new, meteorically popular Smiling Friends. Brendan's music undergirds the adventures of Pim and Charlie across 8 episodes, now available on Adult Swim and releasing in February on HBO Max. Think about how difficult that is to get right. We've talked to Michael and Psychic Pebbles. Those episodes reveal a combination of talent and troubled minds that will quite likely be played one day as evidence at a trial. How is it even possible to capture that accurately in music? Brendan's forced to operate somewhere on a spectrum between Salvador Dali and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So, Brendan, how do you set the scene of Mr. Boss breastfeeding to music?
Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. That's, I don't know, it seems fitting to compare me to John Williams. So I just want to thank you for that. Yeah, in terms of the boss, it's interesting. There's actually more music to that scene that got cut. the whole scene kind of had like this underpinning drone, and like when say the little creature bites on his nipple, that really is when it really sets off. And then there was like creepy piano that plays in the background, just this like really unsettling atmosphere. But what was left in the pilot is like pretty much the tail end of that, which is like the ascending scream out of the depths that like transitions to the next scene.
Well, it seems like Smiling Friends kind of stretches. It must. I mean, maybe it doesn't, but to me, it seems like it must stretch the very limits of your abilities as a musician because of the range of something being like horrifically creepy, like that scene, and then you have like the happiest thing ever in the next scene, and then you have an enchanted forest fantasy thing going on over here. It's like everything possible and imaginable happens on Smiling Friends, and somehow you have to do all of it. Like how do you even begin to be able to hit all of those notes?
It's a very strange thing. Like I think with comedy, you kind of like end up doing pretty much everything. You have to be kind of a jack of all trades. Luckily, I'd just come off of doing YOLO Crystal Fantasy, which as well was very all over the place, and I think a bit more intricate in terms of like the composition. The funny thing about Smiling Friends was that it was a lot more restrained compositionally than other things I've worked on. So it was hard in that respect, in terms of like things weren't meant to be too showy. It wasn't meant to be very like musically rich, or kind of had to like sit in this zone of like it's not just going to be like nothing or like complete garbage, but it's also not going to be the Star Wars opening theme. Had to be somewhere kind of in the middle. And I think that was something that, working on like the first couple episodes, particularly Enchanted Forest, I ran into that roadblock. But it was also something that Cusack and Zach were trying to figure out in terms of the show itself. So there were times where like they weren't 100% sure on like what things should be, because they were trying to get the right feel or tone of the show themselves. So yeah, it was a little bit of back and forth, but after once it kind of like sunk in that it was like meant to be something where it was obviously not too cool. Like I think the brief they said was they didn't want it to like really stand out and be like, oh wow, that was a really cool musical like it just kind of like blends in with and like unless it's like for effect, like in some of the transition or the montage parts or bits where they're not talking, and where you'd want the music to kind of just pop out a little bit. So yeah.
Well, and where do you think that comes from? Because that's really fascinating to me. That's something that I would never ever think of. Is it more that they want essentially the pacing of the jokes and the awkwardness basically that they create in the scenes to be the focus, and the music
very
would
much
be
so.
distracting
There's
from
actually
that?
a good example when I was working on the pilot. I think their biggest worry is like, for one, they don't want like music to be leading up to a joke is very campy. And one example of that was I was doing the music in the pilot when Alan, when his mousetrap goes off and he runs over and he bends over and he like sees the blood stain on the floor and he follows it to the wall. There's a little moment where he's like, I will get you. And I've kind of like this thing where it was slowly building up. I've got the full version, like it's kind of ramping up and it continues when he goes inside the wall, and it like leads to this big crescendo where then it reveals the guy in the wall on the computer. And I remember when I like first sent that off, they were kind of like, it's good, but like Michael's distinctly like, the problem with the music is kind of like building up to like, here comes the joke. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. Like once you spell it out, like yeah. So to solve that, I literally just like cut the music at a really awkward point. So like it's like it doesn't, like it's like a musical rule where it's like, you must resolve like a phrase or something, because it's just it was something like back in like music class where it was like something, this is just what you have to do. You can never leave something. But yeah, it was like okay, well, maybe I'll just cut it like midway through and like literally just let it hang there. And I think that's a lot funnier. And because it's kind of like the music's playing in a way, it's like in Alan's head where he's thinking like, I will get you. And it's like, he's thinking of it as like this, I don't know, like he's about to do this like great deed. But yeah, then it cuts to the reality of him like climbing through the wall and stuff. I don't know. I thought that came across really funnier when I just severed it.
And is the process for that sort of thing, you do a thing, you see how it matches up, and then you can just sort of hear if it's a fit or not.
Sometimes it's a lot of like just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So sometimes I need to like I'll just go down a certain part. Like I'll get the brief basis. Like at this time code, we want a big like a scary moment, like a big stab or something. And so I'll play around with it, send it off, and they'll either be like, oh yeah, it's good. And then it's like, okay, well I'll just leave that in. Or sometimes it's like, no, that's completely wrong. And it takes that like getting it wrong to like then set me on the path to being right. And then ultimately what ends up in the show is, was built off of a failure.
What do you get in terms of assets when you've got to do something like come up with some music for a scene? What are you given
I need
to do the first draft of that music?
So just that basically the rough storyboards, everything's set, like all the dialogue is set out, like it's timed, like the length that it's probably going to be. There's usually edits that happen a bit later, like for time or like, you know, some things make things a bit punchier. They might take out a couple of frames here and there. But it's, for the most part, it's like what the episode's going to be. But it's basically the rough, like black and white sketches, nothing fully animated. But yeah, that's pretty much all I need to work to.
So you're not seeing anything in motion then. So no roughs of animation to any degree. You're basically getting a comic book, and you're tasked with coming up to the soundtrack or with the soundtrack for it.
And so it's such a joy because I get to see like the very early version of the episode, and then eventually I will like get sent. If I'm still working on the episode, usually they'll send me updated versions where it'll be like half animated or it'll be like 95% animated. But that's usually like I'm at the tail end or I'm mixing the music. And it's like always such a joy to like, because I'm like so used to the animatic being the show. And then I'm like, oh, wow. Like, and I guess to go into, we've all seen it now. For example, like working on Enchanted Forest, like I had no idea that Mip was going to be animated in that Rankin and Bass style. So I just, in my head, he was just going to be like one of the other, like the similar design to like Pim and Charlie. And then seeing that, I was like, what the hell? Like it was like I was blown away by it.
Hold on. Is that not really hard to do? Like you didn't seem to mention that it was hard, but it seems extremely hard to do what you're doing.
I don't know. Like it is challenging. Like pretty much every new job is like you're starting from. It's a bizarre thing because I feel like I'm pretty confident and like comfortable in doing this kind of work, but every time I start, it's like feeling like I don't know. I always think in like analogies and metaphors and shit like that. Like I always think it's like you're a chef, but instead of like you're working at a new restaurant where the menu set out, it's like basically every time a new job is like you're opening a new restaurant, but you're inventing a new menu at the same time. So it's like, okay, because every show has its own like kind of limitations and, you know, it's in a certain genre and things it wants to achieve. So you kind of just having to like figure it out as you go. So it is hard, I find, in that respect. But in terms of like just working to an anime, I don't really have a problem with it because it's usually like you get a really good impression of what's happening on screen. Sometimes I think like in the pilot, there was sometimes where it was like there were some really rushed boards where it was like, I think one example, like the boss in the office at one point where it cuts away to him on his gaming laptop, I think was just like his head was just like a really quick circle, like you'd done it in like 2 seconds, just to get like this very, very, very basic impression of what the shot would look like. But for the most part, you're seeing like the, Pim and Charlie in their like designs, and Desmond was pretty much like fully designed at that point. You could see him like you see him in the pilot, but just in black and white. It's not that challenging. It's like using a bit of your imagination here and there. And if there is a problem, like if I really don't know what's happening, I'll just kind of ask for clarification or something like that. Yeah, I think if I'm doing sound design though, like you need full animation for that, because obviously you're doing like Foley and stuff, and you got to match it exactly to the picture. Like the crazy grandma footsteps leading to Desmond's bedroom, and
the grandma hyper speed filleting a lollipop.
Yeah. No,
how did you make? Did you make that sound?
Sound design on the pilot.
How'd you make that sound? Oh, Tom Video just put a GIF of it in the episode chat.
Yeah, that was
oh man,
that's what we need to have in a few weeks. Is we need to find out who made that sound, and then talk to them about that sound and only that sound for at least a month.
Yeah, I'm mates with the sound designer. So if you want to do a part 3 to the Smiling Friends trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, part 3 is literally just the grandma and the lollipop. That's it. There's nothing else. I would love to back way up for a second and just get a better and clearer understanding of how you got into this. Did you go to school for music? Have you known Michael Cusack since you were 4 years old in kindergarten? What's going on here? How did you end up doing this?
Late high school. I moved to the high school that he goes to in like year 11, which in Australia, I don't know exactly what the translation of that is in for US schools, but it's basically the year before your final year. So I moved to this because it was a performing arts high, and I started music as a drummer. I used to play drums, and I was like into heavy metal. And that was pretty much exclusively what I listened to and what I wanted to be. Moved to this high school, met a bunch of guys. I met so I met Cusack. I met Todor, who's another who's involved in a lot of this. Todor actually wrote the Picking Up Twigs song in the Halloween episode.
Oh, that was going to be one of my questions. I literally have that written down. Did you write the Picking Up Twigs song from the Halloween episode?
There you go.
There you go. Mystery solved.
So we all met. Well, he'd known Todor a bit longer, but I met them then. And soon learned that we had similar interests. Made a couple of bands together. We had a doom metal band called Athelas. Had another... Cusack and I had a project, a black metal one called Virgin Meat, which I think there's a video clip of that on his YouTube channel. I think it should still be up there. What else? And pretty much around that, at that point, Cusack was looking at getting into like film and wrote his first feature film around that time, and was like seriously looking at like starting to make that. And so I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'd love to do like music for that. Had no previous experience, but around that time I had a revelation where I was getting into like progressive rock and prog metal and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of like blew my mind in terms of like what you could do musically. So like I think the Mars Volta was probably one of my first bands that I listened to, where I was like, whoa, like you can do so much with music. Like it can be like sound design and do all this, like tell these like interesting stories and crap like that. And so like my biggest ambition at that time was to be like pretty much a solo artist. And it was listening to bands like Porcupine Tree and like Steven Wilson, where it kind of like, at that time I was like, oh wait, you can actually like make it yourself. You can actually produce really cool stuff in your bedroom, and it's like you can make it sound half decent. So at that point I fell in love with the idea of like, oh, I can just make my own stuff, and like went from like plugging in like a guitar pedal directly into the line-in input in the sound card in the computer, through Sony Vegas making like just weird ambient stuff. But yeah, that was at the same time where Cusack was making his movie, and I was like, I'll do the music for that. And yeah, we ended up making this thing. We spent about from about 2010 to 2015 or so, like a good 4 or 5 years of our time just like working on this thing. Did the post-production of that largely at like my grandparents' basement. Essentially, we like moved in there and we're like, yeah, and that was how I pretty much got into doing scoring, doing an indie film, and from that point, Cusack wanted a break from working on it, and because he was always kind of good at drawing, like he wanted to do animation, and I was like, oh well, I'm hanging out with you 24/7, so and we're doing music, I'll do the music for that too, and so I basically just been riding Cusack's coattails until now. And it's just blossomed. Like we did the Gabe Newell one was the first cartoon, and then we did YOLO, like did music and sound design on that, and that really took off. And yeah, and then he started getting jobs, like small jobs on TV, like little 2-minute bits, and I was just the guy. I was like, okay, well, I'll do the music. And then eventually it's like, oh, got the Bushworld pilot, and yeah, did that, and then yeah, so it's just like gradually blossomed, and now yeah, did YOLO last year or so, and here I am today.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of stories are like that, and if there are people out there, listening and wondering, how do I get into XYZ, whatever it is you're trying to get into. I mean, listen to the story of working on this one independent film for 4 to 5 years in grandma's basement. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of this stuff goes. And then, 6 years later, after that, you're doing the score to Smiling Friends. So, things, I think people need to understand to have some patience, but along the way to continue to grind and make things and, be up. You say you wrote his coattails. I would say you created the soundtrack for his coattails.
The way they whistle in the wind.
We complemented each other greatly in that respect, because he had the eye for visuals, which I don't, and I kind of had an ear for sound. So yeah, so we literally he was editing the movie in behind me, and I was like doing sound design and music, and yeah, and he'd help with some of those things. We recorded a lot of Foley together. I was living with my dad at one point, and we're renting a house, and we actually built a little illegal studio in the garage out the back. Basically, I built these 2 walls and propped them up in the corner of a garage, so we can have a separate space, so we could have the actors come back and redo all their dialogue. But yeah, we didn't go to, I think Cusack went to TAFE, which is in Australia is the equivalent of a trade school, to do a film thing. But I think it was he really didn't like it. And I did a similar one for a short time at the same place for a music thing. And I think I did 3 weeks. I was like, this is just miserable. And I just left. Let's just stop showing up. Later did, only a few years ago, actually, I did a college equivalent of one and actually saw that one through, but that was more the sound engineering side of it. So more about recording and mixing and all that kind of crap.
Which you do really need help with.
Yeah,
it's hard to learn that stuff by yourself, from what I understand. I had a roommate in college that majored in that. So I hung around him, in those studios a lot, and
it was
complicated.
And it can be daunting, if you're trying to learn from scratch. And so it's
easy to suck at it. It's easy to do it badly. Yeah, it's kind of hard to do it well.
Good. There's one thing that is good with the college or uni, particularly in sound design. It's basically you're learning a trade. But the degree I did, they added a written component to it, which then made it an actual bachelor's degree, which I'm kind of you don't need it. It'd be easier if it was just the exact same learning, because it's literally just like learning like how to use compressors properly and like using consoles and just like studio etiquette. Like, you're having a band coming in to record and like, make sure you have shit ready to go before you start, and things that like seem obvious, but like in practice, like it's better to like it's very useful to have like an environment where it's like basically like a safe place to practice and suck for a bit. And like, you're not holding up someone's time, or you're not spending thousands hiring a studio and you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, I'll vouch for it in that. And like, it taught me like doing the indie film, like I was learning everything like on the fly, which you can get a decent way with that. But again, you can pick up bad practices and, and never quite understand. I'm like, I know the idea of like, I need to compress the dialogue, but what does that actually mean? And how do they work really? So it's like, when you have someone that like people that have been doing it for like 30 odd years, and they tell you like, oh, this is how you can do it, and here's a trick you can use. It's basically like teaching you how to use like power tools or something. Like, here's the correct way to use it. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, now that I know the
Well, I was gonna say it's almost like being, when you say it's trade school, it's almost like being a plumber or like a welder or something like that. Like, you need to,
it's like apprenticeship.
You're just learning equipment and tools and effective ways to use them. And then you learn like, okay. And once you know how to use them like in a correct way, then from there you can be like, oh, well, now I know how to use it in a weird effed up way, yeah.
So I assume. Sorry. Go ahead.
I want to jump back a little bit to reinforce kind of an overarching theme, because we've talked lately. Last few weeks, we've talked a bit in general terms. It's like, we're 120 some episodes in. What have we really gotten out of this? And if we took all the interviews that we've done, I don't know how many people it is at this point. Let's say 75. Let's say we've talked to 75 different people. If we dumped all of their origin stories into a pot, like simmered it for a while and then poured it into one bowl, it would pretty much come out to be, do you want to spend 5 years in your grandma's basement making one thing for no money?
Yeah.
That's it really is like the perfect arithmetic mean of everything we've ever talked about. But a point that got lost a little bit after that was you talking about the way you complimented Michael. And how many times, Kevin, have we talked about that? Because it's really what you and I do, being completely different, but doing things that the other one doesn't do as well, whatever. I mean, it fits well. And we need everybody to understand how okay that is, how awesome it is, rather than most of the people I talk to are like, yeah, I want to make videos and I want to do all the editing and I want to do, every little bit of it. Like, no. Find people who fit really well with what you do. And you telling that story, look what it's led to for both of you. It's really something that would be hard to plan. And the last little bit, as we were just talking about it, is that blend of structured training and education, whatever, versus just DIYing everything you can. And there's a limit to what you can do yourself. That's a theme that we've talked about so many times over the last 3 years. Is there's a point at which you need somebody else's help. And for one thing, it may be a degree. For something else, it may be hanging around an old dude who can tell you about his, 35 years grinding away. But at some point, somebody else is going to be able to really smooth you out and take you to the next level.
It's very true. Yeah. Like you can have the inverse problem as well, where you just go to like trade school or like, go into these creative degrees saying, I want to be a creative guy. But like you didn't have that initial like gut craving to just want to like make something. So you kind of I feel like you need both. You want that drive and that desire initially in the beginning, because it's like it really working on the movie, like it really sucked for them, like 90% of it. And like Cusack could agree with me, like lot of it was like, just a lot of late nights. I was working a shitty bar job. Like I'd work on the movie for hours, and then my shift would come up. So then I'd go pour beers on a Friday night for a bunch of assholes, and like come back at like midnight, 1 a.m. and then like continue working on the movie, like just because we like we were still like had that drive, but like the actual, the physical, I guess the labor of it was like hard, and it sucked because we'd run into problems and be like, man, why is the dialogue like recording this thing? It sounds like arse, and I don't know how to fix it. So yeah, or like trying to figure out how to mix in surround sound when you don't have like the new the $4,000 version of Pro Tools, and that was a weird thing to do. And like in hindsight, it's like just get the good version of Pro Tools where you can mix in 5.1 instead of like doing all this weird routing and stuff to make it come out of the back. Yeah. So yeah, it's you do kind of need that drive, that like it's like being bitten by the bug, where you just like you can just see the end, like just knowing like, oh, but like then we would have made a movie, like just like I guess the prestige off of that.
Well, that's one thing that we have kind of characterized as be obsessed with something, and it's something that you can't make somebody be obsessed with something. Like nobody made you be obsessed with spending 4.5 years making this movie. You just were. And I also want to say real quick that something that is really important that you said, and that Matt, you were following up on, is that not a lot of people admit to themselves like, hey, I'm not really great on the visual stuff. So, but I do seem to have a knack for audio. So I'll stay there and I'll play in that arena. Not a lot of people will just come out and say that. Like Matt has come out and said to me, over the years when it comes to different visual things, like, okay, I'm going to check out of this conversation because visual stuff is not my thing. Yeah. And do you know what? That's really helpful. Yeah. It's actually really helpful when someone says like, look, I'm going to stop pretending that I know what's good here because this is not my strength. Yeah. So go away and stop talking to me about this, and talk to somebody who is good at this about this, because it will be more productive. I don't think that a lot of people, and maybe this comes with experience and age, but I don't think a lot of people are willing or recognize in themselves the weaknesses that they have, and are able to actually have kind of the strength to admit to another person that like, look, I suck at what you want me to do, so don't ask me to do that. But I'm like more than qualified to do this other thing that, guess what, you kind of suck at. So let's fill in those gaps for each other, which is literally the point of working with someone. That's the entire point of working together with anyone. That's what, I mean, I think a lot of this comes to, for me, sports analogies, but I know that like, I'm a little bit of an outlier in how much I like sports with a lot of people who are like internet-y people. But I promise you can get some lessons if you just watch something. I don't know, find any sport, any team sport. This isn't going to really work all that well with like golf or tennis, but there's a reason why in baseball, the pitcher just pitches and the first baseman just plays first base. And the center fielder stays out there. Like they're really good at those things. Right. Like a wide receiver is not going to play
all those parts
linebacker
come together to make
ever.
A really good team. If they're all good at their like kind of
Yeah, because Tom Brady would suck as a safety. Like he would not be good at that, or like a defensive lineman. But guess what? He's the greatest quarterback of all time.
Input on how him should be designed. Like it would be fucking terrible. So, yeah.
Probably wouldn't go over so well. Yeah, exactly. Getting back to Smiling Friends. Have you done any voices? I'm pretty sure.
No, I didn't
saw some credits.
No, I've done.
Do you sneak
YOLO,
in there?
I've done a couple of cameos.
No? Okay.
Visually, I did the cameo at the end of the episode 4. Like I died in 2001, so that that's my a visual cameo. Yeah.
Oh, that was you. Wait, who was the other? And Mike was there too, wasn't he? Stalkus from Red Letter
I
Media.
mean
Didn't he show up as one of those
the
flashes?
in memoriam cards, like at the very end of the credits.
Oh
No, that was that was,
I was thinking
James
of
Rolfe
that
was the other
montage of
one.
flashes. Oh, I tried to pause it so many times to figure out who the second person
had no
was. I
idea
didn't
either.
realize
Like,
it was James Rolfe. That's so funny.
I was working on it, and got to like when the final. I asked, can I have the final version so I can watch it? Because I had like I think the one I had was like it was like 70% animated, and like the Satan wasn't fully lit up or like wasn't colored properly. And yeah, I had no idea he was in there either. And then I like was looking at the credits. I was like, wait, James Rolfe? Like, where was he?
But I wanted to go back again since you were, talking about your old studio. I imagine you're no longer working behind fake walls built in a garage somewhere. What's your setup like now? What sort of equipment,
it's basically
software
a dedicated
are you using?
bedroom
What does that
in my
look like?
house. But it's set up with some acoustic panels and just like pretty much a PC, few keyboards around me, guitars, got like an audio interface. We're looking at where I've got, because we haven't got a garage at this place, where I'm in the process of getting a draftsman drawing up plans to build a garage. But on top of that, I want to build a dedicated space purpose built for my like a studio. That way it's separate from the house and just like bigger like and that's another thing about today, like these days, like working on this stuff, like you really can do like awesome things from essentially your bedroom, which is like 10 years ago it would have been, even like 10 years ago it would have been kind of like, sneered at, like, oh yeah, like you need, like, there was still kind of that old, like probably like 80s and 90s, that kind of mindset of like, if you want to do anything professional, you got to go to a studio and you got to like have your own space and, have a big, large format console. And, but, yeah, like you can do so much nowadays digitally. Like it's insane, like with plugins and even like hardware and stuff is, and also like if you understand, like I think the other trap, particularly like audio people, like starting out, is like kind of thinking like I need the best gear in order to do the best work. Otherwise my stuff's, but like you can do like so much with very little, like even with gear, like microphones and, you can an SM57 can go a very long way. And yeah, so that's, I'm pretty much just in my, what would be a bedroom in my house. We put a little vocal booth in here, but I rarely use that, like, because pretty much what I do is all virtual, besides the odd guitar every now and then. But yeah.
So you didn't write Picking Up Twigs. I have two other songs I wanted to know about. One is Charlie the Hero from the Enchanted Forest episode, and the other is the theme song itself,
like the 5-second. I wrote that one.
I don't know how to recreate that. It's crazy.
Charlie the Hero was actually the very first thing I worked on for this, like after the pilot. That was the first song I worked on for this season.
What about that intro? Because it's completely bonkers. What was the development for that like? Where did that come from? How did you make it?
I guess there was actually an earlier version of the theme song. Actually, the very first thing I worked on Smiling Friends, it's probably like late 2018. I think it was Michael was over was in LA at the time. I think they like were just writing the pilot. And he messaged me saying like he wanted a theme song that went about 30 seconds, and it was going to be in the style of basically like the Animaniacs opening theme, where it's like this big bombastic kind of very cartoony, orchestral, very quick kind of thing. And it was going to have lyrics. Cusack like basically mimed what he roughly like envisioned as like the vocals, and I like built something around that. That obviously got scrapped. and again, I think that just goes back to like how Michael and Zach have just like gone back and forth so much and trying to work out exactly what the heck this show is meant to be, like in tonally and like they just every little detail they've stressed over. But yeah, and then I think it was more towards the end of the working on the pilot I did that 5-second opening title. I can't remember exactly what the brief was, but I do have the progression of how it became more chaotic. Like just the first version is like just a simple layer of like just a bump 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 bump, and yeah. Then I think Zach was like, "Can you make it a bit more psychotic?" And so I was like, "Okay." So then I don't know, just had this working on with our project Super Smiles has been very helpful for this kind of stuff, because we have like albums and albums of shit that like we've never released, but it's like just like absolute garbage that we've like had a ball making, like just jamming on all these. Like some things will be live spontaneous jams, other ones are like full recordings, and yeah, like just coming up with these like really silly like psycho stuff. Yeah, it's just kind of just been embedded in my DNA from doing all this Super Smiles crap for 10 years. So that doing some of that stuff can come a bit naturally. What was I at? Yeah, so then like added like the weird layers, like I think the but the version before the final one that you hear now, it went even crazier at the end. It kind of went like and then just like and like just like a crazy drum fill, and like I think I just like completely like mashed the keyboard and just like put as many notes as I could within like 4 seconds. But I think that one was a little too crazy, and then Zach was like, maybe make it loop, but then on the last bar just make it like fall apart. So I just made it loop, and then pretty much just took all the MIDI notes that I had recorded, and then just like I think just went to like the MIDI function and just hit like randomize. So then it like, and now it sounds like, I don't know, it kind of sounds like a fucking metal pole has been hit or something. Yeah, and then that's it. So then they're like, cool, like this works. And then that's now become the very first thing that you're assaulted with when you watch the show.
Yeah, which really sets the tone for what you're about to see as far as I'm concerned, because make it more psychotic. What a great note. It is very psychotic. When you listen to it, you feel like you're about to be bombarded by a crazy person, like a crazy person just dropped everything they own down the stairs.
Yeah. It's one of those instances
how it feels
where,
like to me.
I can vaguely remember making it, but now that it's like Smiling Friends has become this thing, it's like I feel detached. Like it was just like a thing that I, like an artifact that I uncovered. Like I didn't have anything to do with it. I just kind of, it was just, like a discovery or something.
Well, we have so many questions, but I wanted to get to two of my questions before we turn it over to our patrons. They're very simple. First, what's your favorite episode of season 1? And what do you want to see in season 2?
My favorite, probably, I don't know. I really like, I guess in terms of my involvement, probably the Shrimp's Odyssey, just because I really love getting to work with Jason Page on that cover song. I don't know. I really like the feel of Enchanted Forest. So that's probably my favorite. Yeah, I think. Oh no, actually no. Probably Frowning Friends is my favorite. Yeah, I don't know. I really like how that episode, like structurally, like the writing of that one. I really like how that one flows, and I think, and I really, and again, like with my involvement, I probably one of my favorite pieces is his speech towards the end. I really like how that came out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about season 2? What are you looking forward to? What should happen in your mind?
I know that a little bit of insider knowledge. I know that they've got a lot of lore built up. Back when I was like just starting to work on the pilot, I remember like things where basically, I remember hearing like about Mr. Frog and like Mr. Frog, the character, and like pretty much how he acts and stuff. back in like early 2019 when they were still working on the pilot, and I was just like, oh my, like I just feel like this show could just go anywhere. So it's really hard to pinpoint, and like just the amount of like lore that is and world building that is in every like fucking detail of that show is really insane. Like an example of that is when I was working on the pilot, there's that little bit in Daveland where when Pym goes, oh, you can meet Dave himself, and then it cuts to that shot where Desmond's like, who's Dave? And when Pym's saying it's Dave from Daveland, there's a tiny little green critter that just like flies past the screen. I remember I think I was talking to like Zach and Cusack, and I was like, oh, that shit like absolutely cracked me up just seeing that little fucking thing, and I like put little footsteps to it and stuff. And yeah, and then Zach and that like just went on this like lore explanation just on that little critter. Like basically like yeah, they're saying like yeah, he's running from an unknown danger. And his visual sense apparently like he can only see like a worm, like it's only like light and dark, and he's been running for hours, and he doesn't know exactly what he's running from, but he knows that something is following him, and he's just in fear for his life, and he just happened to be running through Daveland right at that moment. So like I know, so there's so much potential for any like, I don't know, they just have like a knack for just out of nowhere, out of the ether, even like in the like when we're not even really talking about Smiling Friends, like they could just go into a character and just like, yeah, it's like insane their ability to do that, like just create these. So I honestly have no idea where I think it can go. I do know seeing like some of the early like pitch Bibles, there are a couple of episode ideas that obviously they didn't make. So I reckon they'll probably do those. I'm not going to reveal them for obvious reasons. It's not my place to say what they are, but so hopefully I'll see those. And I don't know.
What about musically? Is there like a genre that you would love for them to parody and you could do, or do you want to hit some sort of, I don't know, Alan starts a black metal band and you get to do a black metal song. Is there anything you personally are ambitious about?
Doing some black metal stuff. I mean, on it, like I'd just be honored to be involved in it. The imposter syndrome is real, just dealing with being involved in the first season. So, I think whatever they want to tell me to do, whether it's like just doing Euro dance music the whole season, like I'd do that. Like, yeah, I don't know. They wanted to do more stuff like cool montage songs. They're kind of like where I guess the most fun, because it's like they're not constrained by trying to fit something to a visual, like in terms of like the scoring. But yeah, I literally I feel like Ringo Starr. I'm like, I'm just happy to be working. Like, I'm just happy to be on the show.
Well, you are a drummer, so I mean that's an apt comparison. Well, we have a million questions from our patrons, so let's transition to those, if you will, Matt.
We have a lot of them. We're going to start with Dan the Latch asking, when is DJ Spit dropping his EP?
I have no idea. I mean, can't really pinpoint anything coherent from that guy. So trying to get a hold of him is, you just have to usually go driving the streets because he doesn't answer his phone. So, yeah. And I guess the thing to point out, I think that was a Cusack and Zach thing with his music, which was Spit's Paradise, I think it's called. I think that was something they just threw together in like a minute.
Well, I guess
do you think people will be able to handle that though?
Isn't forthcoming then, is it? Well, Kevin, didn't we come across that thing? There's an organ playing a song that takes like 550 years to play.
Oh, that's right.
They change notes like every 7 years or something. They
like
play
that.
A new note. If that can exist in the world, I feel like an EP here can exist.
I agree.
Gusau asks about, in the very beginning, we talked about the process of you getting some very basic assets, doing some doing some work, putting a thing together, sending that off, and what the process was like as it turned into animation, you did the fine tuning. Gustav's question is about, is there an example of a lot of effort being put forth in that process just to have,
that can happen.
just to have it get axed?
It's just kind of the reality of like working, like it's not my show at the end of the day. Like I'm contracted to provide something for them. So sometimes, and it's a hard thing to like, you can't really prepare for it. Sometimes even like I can get instructions. Like we sit on a call, we go through an episode, pause it. Okay, at this point, I want this to happen. And I think Enchanted Forest, it happened a little bit. It was also a little bit me going a bit too elaborate with some of the compositions, but sometimes things just like I wrote something for an example. Like I wrote when Mip first appears. Initially, I wrote this big fanfare, whereas when he's like back and he like shoos the witch away. At first, it was like, this is a bit too big and like over the top. So can you tone it back to literally just have like one instrument? Well, so I was like, okay, and I redid it with just like horns. I just did like a more subtle like kind of thing, which that got the thumbs up. And then in the final episode, it got scrapped, and it's just like a little sound effect basically. And ultimately, like things like that, I'm like, okay, like I can see like it makes sense, like it's it works without it. Like there are times where like, because it's being in the creative industry, like when you're making something like music, you are kind of putting your heart into and soul into some of the pieces. There are times where I put something, like I made something for YOLO where I was like, this is like my best thing ever. Like I wrote something, I didn't have to think of it. Like it wasn't a struggle. It sounds really good. I believe it was produced really well. And like compositionally, it was just like, I was like, oh wow, I really nailed this. And it like got completely scrapped. And I was like super gutted. But at the end of the day, I'm like, it's not my show. Like I'm hired to do a job. So yeah.
Can you use those things in the future? Do situations come up where you're like, yeah, I've got this in the bag that I can pull out from, it didn't work 3 years ago, but now it's a pretty good fit. Is that possible with these sorts of things?
Like I might, anything I make that it even gets scrapped. I don't know about that. I think I kind of think if I write a motif and it never gets used, I guess I just assume, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just put that in my pocket and maybe one day it'll come back later. Like I could use it for something else. And I've never really been in that situation yet where I've like thought, oh, that thing that I did on the last project. I've had times where it's like pulling things from before I was working in animation and scoring and, being a composer, like stuff I've written from before then where I've done that, but I had not specifically when it's like for a show and it's gotten scrapped. I haven't tried that yet.
Oh, let's see. We've got one from Tom Videoger, who is, it's so nice to have Tom back. Quick with the links. It's been a few weeks, and he's still doing the Real Weird Sickos podcast with Dojangles and Charles Kahn. We popped the links in quite a few times on it. It's a lot of fun. And they've talked to some of the same people we have, but let's just say they talk to them a little bit differently. So it's totally worth a listen. Check them out. Check them out. And compare the episodes. Oh, so as a fellow Bogan raised in Shepperton, how did it feel bringing the Bogan to the big stage?
I don't know.
With the Yanks?
It's bizarre. Because I'm still living in my hometown. Like I haven't moved to LA. I haven't even thought about moving to Melbourne, which is like the Australian equivalent of LA, I guess. I don't know. It is bizarre, but when I'm working on stuff, I just get hyper focused on that, and it's only until afterwards and I kind of reflect on it. I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. I think it's cool that I'm able to do that.
Is it hard to communicate some of the nuance on on the humor? You take something like Bushworld Adventures, or YOLO Crystal
A lot of
Fantasy,
Aussiness.
something that
Yeah.
that has been broadcast elsewhere. Yeah, and 99% of it translates just fine. What do you do about that 1%? And is there any effect there that creeps in
I
to
don't know. I
the
guess
sound
this is
and
more of
music
an
side
in-joke for me, for us. Bushworld specifically, in the opening theme, there's so much like Australiana actually embedded in that remake of the Rick and Morty theme that I don't think anyone, I think even some people in Australia probably wouldn't even get. And it's also kind of like baked into like the textures. Like right at the very opening, I put in like so many weird Australianism sounds. Also, I thought was the funniest thing ever was I made a synth out of a native bird that you hear that's very iconically Australian. It's like our ravens. They have this very distinct call that's like really annoying, and I've always found it funny. It's called it's just called an Australian
what is this
raven.
Annoying Australian bird called? Sorry,
they're mistakenly called. No. It's a raven.
I thought you were just describing it like that. That's literally what it's
like,
called. Okay,
it's like and you hear them everywhere, like especially along the East Coast. If I feel like Aussies, like it's like part of our like background noise that like you don't think about, but then when it's like put in a show, I just thought was the funniest thing ever. Like, yeah. So it's in the Rick and the Bushworld theme, and there's all a bunch of other things. Like I did the Ball of the Century that Shane Warne did, rugby league try whistle, some weird things like Chappelle Corby's mum on the news saying, "We will bring you home." What else was there? I just was like trying to think of like weird things to just bake into this like Aussie cake. Yeah. So no, but that was like for my own kind of fun, I suppose. I don't think it intended to translate at all. Like
no squelching from a kangaroo's pouch, nothing like that.
The desperate squeal from inside a possum.
Too bad. Next time. I love Bushworld, by the way. And if anybody hasn't seen Bushworld, please do yourself a favor, because you're doing yourself a disservice currently for not having spent 11 minutes of your life watching Bushworld Adventures. It's so good.
Well, we've got some music questions that come from Baseweight. Baseweight is really the Create Unknown Discord resident music guy. He made the theme that we use at the intro of every episode, and he is shockingly talented. We've got his links in the description. He's got a few music questions that we're going to have fall like dominoes here, because they're all kind of related. But we'll start with, what's the biggest difference moving from songwriting in the traditional sense
the
to
biggest difference
scoring?
Is scoring for video or for like TV, film, is it's basically you're adding another dimension. When you write it, like, because I've written songs like for like bands and my own solo projects and crap like that, and when it's for yourself, you're pretty much in a vacuum, and you're just like, okay, I can, whatever genre I'm in, you're pretty much limitless in what you can do. But scoring, you're a contractor, so for one, you're constrained by what the directors and stuff want you to do. So specific, like, they might tell you to do a certain genre that is not my wheelhouse, but I'll do it anyway. So there's that, like, you're constrained by following basically a guide or a brief. But then it's also like, okay, I'm writing music, but it's also got to fit visually. So I'm like, I kind of come up with like all right, here's like just bashing on the piano, like, here's a good chord and melody structure. But then it's like, okay, now I've got to sit and watch the animatic or whatever I've got, and basically, okay, start it here, okay, maybe, and then like try and mime it out to make sure that it actually fits visually too. So like, if I want to do like the chord changes on when the video cuts to another, like, or when the shot cuts to another shot, that has to be figured out, like, make like logistically. So I have to like literally like sit there and like actually figure out the timing and everything too. So like that added dimension really kind of is very hard at first to get used to, but I don't know, after it's just something eventually you just kind of get used to it. You start thinking more in that terms as well. So it becomes secondary. You're like just watching the episode back and being like, okay, yeah. I could see like I'll do like something here and then it changes at this point and when it cuts, and it just something that eventually becomes second nature. But kind of like any new skill you kind of pick up, it's like you're just having to develop a new muscle.
Well, when you're doing all of this, if you have one, what is your favorite instrument and effects plugin?
Favorite instrument probably right now would be probably like a cello section. They're just so damn expressive. Like, I mean, every orchestral
no kidding
instrument can be very expressive in its own right. But I just find, I know, listening to like some classical music or like soundtracks that are orchestral based, just whenever there's like a good cello kind of solo or thing by itself, I just really love it. Favorite effect, I like the.
Yeah, is there anything that you really like applying that helps you get kind of put your signature on a thing?
I don't know. It's it's a funny thing because like when I'm like doing effects and like mixing and stuff, it's literally like just like a sequence of a million A/B tests where it's like, does this make it better? Yes. Okay, keep going. And it's like I don't really have a plan and when things are going to get done, so it's literally just like throwing everything at it, and I'm like. I guess I really like using isotope ozone for mastering. Like you really can polish turds with that thing. I really like. So I've got like subscribed to a few different. Everything now is like a subscription model. Got some plug-in subscriptions like the Slate Digital thing. I got that. Get a bit more geeky now in terms of the gear side of things. I got it specifically because they have a EL8 distressor plugin, which is like a really cool compressor modeled off a real thing that I really like using. I like the SSL bus compressor plugin. There's plugin versions that mimic the, I don't know what model console it is, but that I really love using on like drums and percussion-y stuff. It's a good way to glue things together. Got some Eventide reverbs that are really nice.
So it's arranged, and it sounds like it really
having some really good
depends
reverbs
on
for
what you need in that
doing
moment.
orchestral stuff to make it sound convincing. I don't know. I've picked up a tip on a YouTube video of using two different kinds of reverbs and blending them together. I've kind of stolen that as a signature now, I think. But it's like something that you'd never. Sorry.
Well, this one is.
I was just saying it's a subtle thing though that pretty much
go on.
Like other like sound people might be like, oh, that sounds really cool, but it's I don't. It's not. I really like my some of the sample libraries I have are really good. The Cinematic Studio series. I really love the strings and brass of those. The strings have a really good legato thing, so that's my go-to for orchestral stuff.
Well, you've talked about having to switch gears so many times in something like the making of one episode. There's just going to be so many different spots that you have to fill. And the question here is about your biggest help with creating moods with music. What has been most useful with getting to the right mood?
So it's a very hard question to answer because it really depends on like I guess depending on what kind of mood you want to set. I really like doing unsettling moods. Like the Halloween episode was, besides doing the Charlie the Hero song, the Halloween was actually the first episode I worked on, and that was like the most labor intensive. I like to make a good spooky mood.
How do you get in a mindset? Yeah, how do you get in a mindset that allows you to really nail an unsettling mood? Like, what do you do to yourself to just be in the space that's like, I need to be absolutely deranged for the next 2 hours as I work on this? It seems like there are a lot of ways to do that, and I just wonder what they are.
Previous examples. So, like, listen to like horror movie soundtracks, different styles of that. Like, I really like Stanley Kubrick, and like The Shining is one of my favorite movies. So, like, that has a very, very unsettling soundtrack. But so I like to incorporate that real uneasiness of that. But then blended with like more modern things with like big loud bangs and screeches and like it's to create the mood though. Usually I guess a good sub bass would be for like an unsettling atmosphere, and then just like pitchy things like a brass that kind of like subtle approaching like horror music, and like working on, because with the Halloween episode, they really wanted it to try and be scary. Like that was one where I was allowed to really kind of go all out. And what was I? God damn it! Just lost my train of thought. Okay, scary music. So I'm having an absolute brain fart right now.
It does. I've read so much about this over the last 20 or 25 years when it comes to writing. And, there are all these solutions that people have that's like, I need my writing space to be comfortable in this certain way. And I do my best. I feel like every bit of it that I have ever read is absolute bullshit. I think it's a complete made up lie, because never in my life, I mean, there are a couple things that I want to avoid. There's some do not do things, but building like this weird little nest of productivity, I'm like, no, I don't think it works that way. And even if it did, is it similar for the guy writing children's books as it is for Stephen King?
If you went completely down to like, I'm going to be
hate the notion
like
of it.
writing when I am inspired, shit will never get done, because at the end of the day, like, there are producers and there are executives and there are people that are paying for this project to be done. So you actually need to deliver something. Like, you can't just George Lucas it forever. There's a artist that probably another one of my biggest influences, and especially in his more recent stuff, in terms of horror, is a guy called Scott Walker. He was a pop artist in the 60s with a band called the Walker Brothers, and they became really big in like the mid 19 to about 1967. And he went off and down a very artistic path, and he only wanted to do his own thing. And then eventually he only released an album, basically. Like, he was like pure artist in that he never wanted to like try and force anything. So one of his albums took like 10 years to write because of that. And it's like, so like, we can't all be like that. And especially for like, if you're not established or you're working for like, because like people are just going to be like, okay, where's the music? Like, we have a meeting scheduled on Friday, and we need to review it. And but it's like, oh no, I'm not I haven't been in the right headspace to do it. It's like, that's why it's kind of like I try to treat it like, I mean, there's obviously going to be some amount of having a creative spirit and like, having spontaneous like inspiration and and just having this kind of like these great kind of artistic moments. But also you kind of got to treat it like you're getting up for a job. Like, right, I'm clocking on, I'm going to put in some hours, and then I'm going to go play Nintendo like afterwards. Like, you kind of have to treat it like that, because otherwise you just won't deliver anything. So, yeah.
Not everybody can be Tool. You can't just put out an album every 15 years.
Well, the last question is really broadly applicable to anybody listening here. And we've talked since the beginning about how important the relationships are through all of this. Even if somebody isn't working with you, being able to talk to them about your project and just commiserate with them is hugely important. So what relationships have you made in your time as a musician and composer that you would consider to be the most valuable, how did they happen? And how do people just generally find this?
It's something
this
you can't
kind of thing in their
give
lives.
like a direct answer, like, oh, well, you just need to do this. It's something that like you just have to kind of learn for yourself. Like I became friends with Cusack in high school. We just had like a very same like style of, well, we just found the same things funny and we're into the same things. And it was literally just like, I made a friend at school kind of thing. And then that's blossomed into like this. So, there are, I think, you do meet other people along the way. And I think for one thing is to personally to be dependable, and, you know, be able to deliver something that's good, but not be a dick. Be like, it's kind of simple. Yeah.
This is the exact advice. We did a whole podcast on this.
Just in December.
Yeah.
In December, we were like, do what you say you're going to do. Do it on time and don't be an asshole about it.
Yeah.
Like that is 95% of making it.
But especially in like in a creative industry, like you can be like the next Beethoven, but if you're like super pretentious or you're like just an arsehole or like, you know, it'll be done when it's done kind of thing, like you won't find much work because there's going to be someone else out there that can be almost as good as you, but is as likable and delivers stuff on time. So they're kind of the golden rules. And it's like, it's not like you have to really like make a show and dance of like, oh, look, see, it's on time. Like, it's literally just like, okay, we need this by Friday, or like so a lot of time, especially working on TV and cartoons and whatnot, you know, like I said, I've worked at animatics and then the final animation will come in, or like Cusack will be in the studio doing the final sound mix, like ready to be sent off to Adult Swim. And it's like, shit, only now last minute, I realize that there's got to be a musical moment right here. And I'll get a call and be like, look, sorry, but like, and I'll be, you know, having dinner with my wife and it's like, we need this, like, really sorry, but we really need something here. And could we have it? We need it by tomorrow. And just be like, okay, I'll do it. Like put in the work and just be like, okay, I've done it. And like those kind of things can just, I feel like can go a long way. Like it just kind of, it's like, it just leaves the favorable impression. And like where, you know, I've made friends with the sound designer of the show now. And like, I've worked with him on a few things now. And like, he's told me now that he does a lot of work for like some like networks and stuff in Australia. And he's like started recommending me for like, if he's working on a docu-series or something, he'd be like, oh, I know this composer. And it's like, it's literally just because I'm like friendly with the guy and I deliver like, oh, can we need this done? I'm like, wow. Okay, I'll do it. Like, yeah, you kind of like, if you see an opportunity to kind of go like, and that can apply again, like when you're in university or like, you know, you're doing like learning the engineering side of things, you can meet people that just are on your page and that have that same desire or have been bitten by the same bug as you have. And, you know, you have a good experience like doing a project together. And like, I don't know, people remember that. Like I remember that. And like, I'm getting to a stage now where I'm getting a few jobs and where I'm literally not going to have time to do everything. So I'm like going to start outsourcing. Like I might need a second composer to help me with some of this stuff. And it's like, oh, well, you know, I'll reach out to my friend who I know is a good composer and like who I just like. Like I'm more likely to go for that than to like try and find who's the, you know, like I'll think back to like someone I met at uni and just be like, oh, I remember him. He was a good guy. Like, oh, might see what he's up to. Maybe he'd be interested. Like, I feel like that's like 99% of the industry. It's like you manage to get an opportunity and you just like seize it and you be nice about it and you just be friendly. Like, and it's, yeah. It sounds really simple, but it's
yeah, actually do the work. It sounds simple, but it's amazing how many people don't follow that advice. It's like, why don't I get opportunities? And that person does. Well, that person is doing all the work to get those opportunities. And when you're not doing anything, why would anybody give you opportunities? You have to do the work to be asked.
Yeah,
For,
and like
for somebody else to ask you to do work.
You have to be ready for like
you have to be a person who does
like
work.
Even working on like this show's like the best show to ever work on, and like there are times where I'm like, God, like I'm struggling, like and like I really don't feel like doing it today. Like it's a lot that happens like all the time, but like you just remind yourself of what you're doing and like or where you want to be, and I don't know, you just kind of get through those things. Yeah.
Well, and that's what having a job is. I mean, when I was waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go crawl around crawl spaces in like freezing weather to sling radiant heat tubing, I didn't want to do that at all. I did not want to do that. I can assure you.
Sound like
that was not fun, but I had to. Yeah, that was my job. I had to get paid. I had to make money. I had to get up and drag my butt out of bed and, put on my Carhartt onesie. And like, fight with basement spiders and grind nails out of subfloor and have like the molten metal burn my skin. Sometimes you just have to do that. Yeah. I think that was great advice, definitely to wrap up on, and something that, we talk about this stuff all the time. And I hope that it's, getting through definitely to people, because it comes back over and over and over again. You get the jobs because you say yes when people ask you to do stuff, and you do it on time, and you do it without being a jerk.
How far that
and
goes.
It's fascinating how well and how long
because
that,
you don't,
that goes.
and even if you think it's a minor job, like I've done little like side jobs where I only got paid like, a couple $100 or something to do a little thing, or I might do a favor for a mate or something, but like you just have no idea where these things will go. Like I had no idea I'd be sitting here talking to you guys, like being asked about what I do. Like I just feel like I'm just, like Cusack and Zach are they're the architects, they're the grand designers. Like I'm just the guy that fucking hooked up the electricity. That's why like these things, you just never know where these things are going to go.
Yes, well, we all need electricity. Smiling Friends needs music. So does YOLO Crystal Adventures and Bushworld YOLO Crystal Fantasy, Bushworld Adventures. All this stuff is better because of the work that you do. So I hope that everybody, if you haven't checked out these works, check them out, especially Smiling Friends, since we're on the Smiling Friends kick right now, and we'll have Zach and Michael on next week. But I also want to plug something that I learned about just today, and that's Super Smiles Good Time. Super Smiles Good Time EP is available on Spotify and I imagine any place else where chaotic, psychotic, purposefully crazy, terrible music is available. Is that right? SoundCloud, exactly. Check out the SoundCloud. Super Smiles Good Time EP. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure, and great work on all of the stuff that you're doing. I'm a huge fan of all of these shows, and obviously you're a major contribution to all of them, and it was great. It was great learning about how you do what you do, because it's definitely a mystery, I think, to literally everybody. Like no one really understands.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm
how
happy to
that sausage is made.
Only the music people get
like that's it. Yeah,
we're happy to pass on whatever wisdom I've gained. Like I'm very flattered you guys reached out, and I'm happy to be doing this kind of thing, and I'm happy that people are enjoying it. And
yeah, I love it. I've already watched Smiling Friends in its entirety twice. I'm going to make it, I don't know. We'll see if I can get to 5 times by the time next Tuesday rolls around. But yeah, definitely join us next Tuesday when we have Zach and Michael on. Until then, you have to make sure that you watch all of Smiling Friends. If you haven't, it's on Adult Swim right now. And if you are an HBO Max person, you have to wait until February. But yeah, try to watch it before next week. We are out of here. Until then, though, thank you again, Brendan, for joining us. We'll see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% goes directly to keeping episodes going every week. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Jen Mafasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Risebread, Sean Malone, Triple Question Mark, Ryan, Kamikaze, Maria, Marco, Sheep, Tom Videogre, Jelksies, and Dan the Latch. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders. Linus and Trev's Dead, Boromir, Bot Dogs, Chinchilla, Isaac, Conrad, James, Andrew, Jeff Davis, Patrick Pister, Baseweight, Monahim, Dojangles, and Zero. Again, you are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster and producer Dan Yosua. And thanks to Baseweight for use of the Created in the Unknown song for our opening theme, and to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.